Welcome, I'm Ian for Bond Ian, and today we're going to be ranking the Daniel Craig James Bond movies. The most recent iteration of James Bond obviously finished with No Time to Die back in 2019, but the tenure that Daniel Craig had spanned such a long period of time, 15 years from when he first hit the screens in Casino Royale. So his tenure was technically the longest of any James Bond that we've had. And today we're going to go through each of the movies and where it ranks in my personal scale. Now, coming in at number 5, we have got Quantum of Solace. Now, the reason I've put this at number 5 is for a few reasons. Firstly, it's the only direct sequel in the history of the James Bond movies. So you do kind of, in a way, need to have seen Casino Royale to fully understand where this movie is going. Granted, it does stand on its own and you can watch it and enjoy it on its own, but realistically it was always designed as kind of Casino Royale Part 2. Now again, with this movie there are a lot of things to break down. Firstly, it's a very chaotic movie. It doesn't help that when the film was written it was very rushed because there was a writer's strike on, so the film was pretty much finished by Michael G. Wilson, and I believe Daniel Craig, Mark Forster had some input as well, but the script certainly wasn't finished, and that does show with the movie. Its short runtime as well also does mean that it is a very hectic movie. It's always moving. Now, I've got nothing against fast moving films, but at times this does seem a bit disjointed and it does seem to just kind of race through the plot. In terms of Craig's performance as Bond, he does a solid performance here. He seems a little bit more sort of used to the role, which of course he will have done because he'd already filmed Casino Royale just a couple of years prior, and as I've said, he does seem to be a little bit more kind of secure with the role. One thing that I have noticed here, and it did become a trend with the Daniel Craig series, the whole angle with M and Can I Trust You, it kind of started here and it did get old very quickly. The film's villain, Dominic Green, is one of the more understated and less interesting villains. He really doesn't have that sense of imposingness that previous Bond villains have had, and his plan to steal Bolivia's water supply and then sell it back does seem a little bit convoluted. All in all, I do find Quantum of Solace a watchable film, but I do find, compared with other movies that we've got within the Daniel Craig series, this is, for me, is number 5, is bottom of the scale. Moving into the movie that is rank 4 for me is Spectre, and this is for a couple of reasons. The movie itself did have a lot of potential and it is a very fun Bond movie. I do find elements of it that do harken back to the older style of Bond movies, and what really drags this movie down for me is actually Ernst Stavro Blofeld. I find the whole reason for him being in this movie very convoluted, and the fact that he's supposedly been masterminding all of the Daniel Craig movies up until this point, for me it just didn't sit right. Why they needed to pull strands of previous movies and try and tie it all together in this movie, it just didn't work. They should have just left Quantum as its own thing or an offshoot of Spectre, rather than making Blofeld the mastermind behind all of the previous movies. And also, talking of Blofeld, there was really no need to use the plot point of Blofeld being Bond's half-brother and the whole Oberhauser story. I find this, again, just a lazy way of making the movie. The Blofeld should have just been Blofeld, and we shouldn't have been relying on nostalgia and the name to actually mean anything with this movie, because for somebody coming into the movie, him just saying I'm Blofeld really didn't mean anything, unless you've seen the old movies with Sean Connery, in which Spectre was such a dominant force and big time foe of Bond. But the whole I'm your half-brother, lazy writing and lazy filmmaking, and it just opened itself up to ridicule and comparisons, realistically, with the Austin Powers movie, which were in fact a parody of the Bond movies. So that just really didn't do it for me. In terms of the Bond girls, Madeline Swan, Léa Seydoux is beautiful, and she does play the part fairly well, although I didn't really feel any chemistry between the two of them. That was rectified somewhat in No Time to Die, but I didn't feel that the chemistry between the two warranted him quitting the service at the end. It just seemed a very rushed way of Bond supposedly falling in love and then quitting the series. Didn't hold up for me, and again, missed opportunity because it could have been a really good Bond movie. It looks beautiful despite the washed out tones that they're using and the filtering that make this just very sort of bland in a lot of places. Now, moving to the midway point of the Bond movies, this one for me was a pretty easy placement. No Time to Die comes in at number 3 for me, and this is a huge missed opportunity of a Bond movie. It could have been so much more. I absolutely loved this movie. For the first 2/3 of it, it felt just everything that I wanted from a James Bond movie. The relationship with Madeleine worked, the story kind of worked, Blofeld really kind of wasn't needed. It did give me Bond film vibes, and it looked beautiful. This film is absolutely beautifully shot. Cary Joji Fukunaga did an amazing job with this movie. It looks absolutely fantastic. And the best part of the movie for me was Ana de Armas. Her Paloma character just steals the show with those Cuba scenes. She was sorely misunderused, and in my opinion, she should have been the main Bond girl. She should have actually had a fleshed out part that was in more than just the Cuba scenes, because she was absolutely the best part of this movie for me. Moving into what I didn't like about this movie, and kind of what lets it down for me, is the whole, well, the most of the third act, realistically speaking, when they actually get to Safin's lair, the whole nanobots, Bond being infected and never being able to touch Madeleine or Matilda again, realistically setting up that whole self-sacrifice at the end of the movie, just didn't work for me. Granted, in terms of storytelling, it actually worked, and then with Madeleine telling Matilda the story about James Bond at the end, I kind of get that it all goes full circle. But this is a James Bond movie. We don't want to walk out of it feeling all sad and depressed. Bond should never, ever end up dead at the end of the movie. Realistically speaking, what we expect from a Bond movie is for Bond to actually succeed and to end the movie on a high note, and unfortunately this just didn't do that. And even now, after having watched the movie a number of times, I can appreciate the movie for what it is. I absolutely love the first 2/3 of the movie, but then when it gets towards the end, we kind of know what's coming, and it just is a huge anticlimax. So this movie could have been higher in my rating, but as it stands, it's stuck at number 3. Now, moving into the top 2 movies, this I did find very difficult because both Skyfall and Casino Royale are 2 of my favourite, not only Craig Bond films, but 2 of my favourite Bond films. So this I did find very difficult to place the 2 of them, but I'm going to go for, in second place, Skyfall. And the reason for this is purely that Skyfall is a beautiful Bond movie. Sam Mendes did a fantastic job of constructing this Bond movie, and I have a lot of time for it. I really do love it. The visuals, the way it's shot, it just looks absolutely beautiful. The villain of this movie, Silva, is perfectly played by Javier Bardem. His whole demeanor, his character, the way he plays the part is just so menacing and just classic Bond. However, I do find that the whole plot that is developed is constructed in a way that there is no way that every story beat would have met with what he needed for the story to actually work. So I do find that the story is in a lot of ways very convenient. Not taking away from that, the story does work in a lot of ways. The way M is brought into this, and the way that Judi Dench basically says goodbye to her character of M after being in the last sort of 7 Bond movies, it does play really well. The way the Aston Martin is used, I like the way that this movie is set an awful lot in England, and in particular in Scotland, going back to Skyfall Mansion. I love the way that the Aston Martin is brought in as Bond's personal car, and a lot of one-liners are back. Bond is starting to have fun again. The things I'm not too hot about this movie is the whole Bond being again out of the service, being brought back. Of course, he gets shot by Eve at the beginning of the film, who we later find out is Moneypenny, and the whole Bond being a little bit out of step and not being on peak point like he normally is. The new Q is an interesting take. Ben Whishaw does play Q in a very different way, obviously. than Desmond Llewellyn and John Cleese before him. Of course, being a younger actor, he will obviously play it in a more sort of tech, nerd, geeky way. And it kind of does work for this movie. And again, where they take the Q character over the next couple of movies, for me, kind of does work. It goes a little too far in No Time to Die, but nonetheless, these new MI6 people are, again, this is the first time we see them. This is the first time that we actually see a lot of the traditional setup. And of course, Gareth Mallory coming in and ultimately becoming the new M at the end of the movie with the traditional old office. Again, there's a lot of things in this movie that I really do love. And Skyfall, very serious contender for number one, but it was edged ever so slightly with Casino Royale. Now, of course, Casino Royale was the movie that launched Daniel Craig's tenure as Bond, and this takes Bond back to the beginning of his career. So arguably this is a different version of Bond that we've seen in the previous 20 movies. So we get to see Bond start his career, get his 2 kills, and essentially start that journey. Falling in love with Eva Green's Vesper, and let's be honest, who wouldn't fall in love with Eva Green? She's absolutely beautiful. And Bond and Vesper, their relationship, for me, is the whole point of this movie. It really does work. You really do see these 2 characters get closer to each other and fall for each other. And then the whole Bond losing Vesper at the end, using the line from the novel, "The bitch is dead." It's absolutely fantastic in my point of view. And the movie itself does take a lot from the Casino Royale novel, but there is a lot more added in there. So the parkour chase at the beginning of the movie is absolutely next level and brilliantly shot. It is just absolutely awesome to see. The whole section at Casino Royale in Montenegro, where they're playing Texas Hold'em, is actually, for saying that a card game can be that engrossing on film, they did an awesome job of filming this and actually playing, and you do get a sense of being included in this game. I absolutely love it. Then of course at the end of the movie in Italy and Vesper double-crossing Bond, everything in this movie worked. Martin Campbell, back for his second round of directing, does an amazing job. The film looks absolutely beautiful, and the locations I've mentioned, they filmed in the Bahamas, they filmed in Italy, they filmed in the Czech Republic. It looks amazing. I absolutely love this film. It looks so good, and it is a perfect launching point for Craig's tenure as Bond. Hence why I still think out of all of his movies, this for me does sit right at the top, very, very closely followed by Skyfall. 2 of my favourite movies overall, as I've said earlier, not just in Daniel Craig's 5 movies. And that is my ranking of the Daniel Craig James Bond movies. Let me know how it compares to yours, because I appreciate everybody likes different movies in different ways. And what is your ranking for the Daniel Craig Bond movies? Let me know in the comments below whether they matched mine or whether yours is slightly different. But with that, I'm going to get out of here. Thank you very much for watching. If you do subscribe to this channel, thank you very much. If you don't, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It is free. It won't cost anything. It really does help this channel to grow. We are trying to grow this channel. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.